Many stories have been told by many people about the Million Man March. Is there an untold story? And if so, what is it?
Well, the root of everything that Allah has blessed us to do since the departure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad goes directly back to him. Such a wise and great teacher had the ability to plant seeds in the mind of those of us who were his students. And I, in particular, he planted seeds that he knew I didn't understand at the time. But at some time in the future, those seeds would germinate into actions that would lead to consequences, both good and bad. When Dr. Martin Luther King passed away or was assassinated, I wept. And when I met with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I asked him about, why we were at odds with Dr. King, not as a human being, not as a fighter for our people, but the methodology that he chose was different from the method that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X were espousing. But yet, I was broadcasting, and in one of the broadcasts, just before he was killed, I said, Dr. King is marching to the drumbeat of death. And I didn't realize the gravity of my remarks. And shortly thereafter, our brother was assassinated. When I sat with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said, as long as the testator lives, he's writing his testament. But when death comes, it puts a period to his testament. Then the historians come and gather up all the bits and pieces of his life. And then that person is assigned their place in history. What you are doing, and those with you in the arts and culture ministry are doing, you are documenting our own history so that the revisionists who always revise, correct, and distort the lives of Black people and great people of consequence among our people. So I thank you and those with you for the noble work that you are doing, and I pray for its success. We were talking about the March on Washington that Dr. King was a part of, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was being critical, not of our reason for marching, but the spirit of like it's a party, or we're having fun, or instead of the serious demeanor that should accompany such a noble thing as a march for jobs and justice. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, one day I'm going to lead a march, brother. And he said, we won't leave Washington until we get what we go for, and that is justice. And it went in. And then, of course, with my experience on the wheel, and I understood that the war that Reagan and his Joint Chiefs of Staff had planned against Libya also had a bearing on another small Muslim nation and on black people in general. So the war had started. And what most black people do not realize as we are sitting at this interview, that the government has been at war with the black community since the Reagan-Bush years in the White House. And so I started a tour on stopping the killing because we saw that they were featuring young black men in particular in films such as Colors, such as Menace to Society, New Jack City, all of these pictures which went throughout the world, but depicting young black men as savage, as vicious, as really berserk, insane, little beasts. And so I thought that they were setting the stage so that when the attack on black people came, there would be no outcry from the world, because we were looked at then as the Achilles heel of America, that this great nation had this weak thing inside it that they had no more jobs for. They had no real future here. So how do you get rid of a problem? And so we went on this tour, Stop the Killing. And I remember in New York City, we came to the Jacob Javits Center, and there was an election plan. David Dinkins was the mayor, and he was coming up for re-election if he would make a second term. And black leaders, when they knew we were coming, we were going to go to Yankee Stadium to try and fill it. The black leaders in New York came to me, and through, I can't remember who it was, but they did prevail on me, please, not to come, because Dinkins wants to be re-elected, and we feel that your presence would not be helpful to his having a second term. I said, well, I mean, if we fill Yankee Stadium, we could have Mr. Dinkins have a spokesperson there and encourage those persons to go to the polls and vote for him. That didn't fly with them. So I told them, okay. They said, if you don't come, when you do come, all of us will be in support of you. So I backed away from Yankee Stadium, went on the Stop the Killing tour. So when I did come to New York, we were at the Jacob Javits Center, and of course thousands of persons came out, and the only leader that showed up in fulfillment of the promise that was made to me was the Reverend Al Sharpton. And During my talk that day, I asked the question, if I would come back and gather men to speak to an all men's meeting, would you all come? And they cheered and said yes. And that's when going around the country again, just talking to black men started. I was advised not to do it by very strong people, but they said, you know, Farrakhan, if you go talking to all men, they will think you're trying to raise an army. And I weighed their request, and I said, well, I'm going to talk to black men. So I came to New York. New York, I had the Armory on 142nd Street, I believe, and 5th Avenue. And that night, the Armory was filled to capacity. People all down blocks. I mean, 142nd, they had people in line to 145th Street and beyond. And women were coming, bringing their sons and telling them, you go in there and hear Farrakhan. And that night, when I spoke, I said, I want to take 1 million black men to Washington, D.C. And I think I may have used the term with 1 million man march or something like that. And when the word went out of my mouth, I watched it go out. And I didn't really believe that we could get 1 million men, but I had to go catch the word. So we started a tour throughout America, which kicked off in Harlem, and we went to Washington here. We had over 14,000 in the Armory here. We had 19,000 men in Atlanta, Georgia. We had 35,000 men in Houston, 10,000 in Dallas. I mean, men were really showing up. But then we started getting a lot of flack from some of those who organized marches in the past. And some of the pastors said, what does Farrakhan know about marches? You know, he said, we are the marchers. We could show him something about marching. And he said he's all backwards because we were marching on a Monday. And he said, nobody holds a march on Monday. We always hold it on Saturday. But I wasn't looking for a weekend crowd. We were looking for a group that was willing to make a sacrifice of a day's work, a day at school, to show God that we wanted to atone for being not so good fathers, not so good husbands, not so good brothers, and we wanted God's forgiveness. So that was the start of the beginning of the Million Man March. And I will close that with these words. I never realized at that time how deep the war was on the black community. But under Reagan started the attack on Muammar Gaddafi. But his successor, George H.W. Bush, they were fighting the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, because this is a socialist rising now in Central America. We already had Castro in Cuba. So America needed money to fight that war, and Congress wouldn't give money for that adventure. So Saudi Arabia, I believe Prince Bandar, the ambassador from Saudi to America, agreed, and they got $32 million to start the fight against the rise of the Sandinistas. And it is then that drugs, a very dangerous drug, a chemical concoction, was made from cocaine. And enter Freeway Rick Ross from California. He was an unwitting co-conspirator in the so-called war against drugs. But it wasn't a war against drugs. It was using drugs in a war that would incarcerate tens of thousands of black youth. So the war was really on us. And so the Million Man March was our response to this. And by the grace of Almighty God, Allah, the rest of it is history, but the revisionists have already done their job. And those who were hateful that I, as a Muslim, called the march, and 88% of those who responded were Christians. And so we never got the credit for what Allah guided us to do. But maybe in this documentary, not that we are looking for credit, because all praise, always at all times, belongs to Allah. But the history should be written correctly.
When the call came out of your mouth and you said you saw those words come out and you called for 1 million, it's one thing to call for 1 million people. It's entirely different to call for 1 million black men. At one point in the process, did you realize that the 1 million mark was going to be reached and it would be surpassed as well?
In honesty and truth, I worked with so many others to produce it, but I didn't know that such would happen. The enemy, who has all the means of polling and testing and watching and seeing how many buses were rented in this city and that city, they began to know that the Million Man March was really going to be a 1 million man march. I never knew. I just was working. So when the call came out of our lips and we went to work, it was a hope. The first thing I did, I wrote a letter to Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, and I wrote a letter to the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson. And I asked both of them if they would join me, Imam Muhammad as a Muslim leader and Reverend Jackson as a Christian leader. I didn't hear from the Imam, and nor did I hear from Reverend Jackson. And since it was just a call to men, some of the activist women thought that this was a slight against females. But really, the mother of the march was Dorothy Height. And Dorothy Height, I learned, went to the hospital because one of the great civil rights leaders beat her up, not physically, but with words as to why she was supporting Louis Farrakhan. And she got sick over it, but she never wavered. She stood strong. So if you look at the March on Washington in 1963, to the best of my knowledge, the only woman that was on the program was Mahalia Jackson. Other than that, I don't think women were on the program. The opposite was true with the Million Man March, because Betty Shabazz was there, Maya Angelou was there, the mother of the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks was there. Brother Malcolm's daughter was with the mother. She was there. And women were behind the scenes helping to organize it. Cora Masters Barry, the mayor of Washington, and his wife, there wouldn't have been a march without them. And then the Reverend Willie Wilson and Reverend Mary Wilson and all the members of his church. And there were women all over the country that were intrigued that men wanted to atone for being less than what we should be. So it was a combination of so many wonderful people that helped make the Million Man March what it was. You can't leave out Maulana Karenga, Haki Madhubuti, Dr. Conrad Worrell. All of these are great nationalist leaders. And then there were professors from various colleges and universities. And brother, let's start with the Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis at the time. He was like the assistant in bringing the march together with Reverend Willie Wilson, Reverend Albert Sampson of Chicago, the great Reverend Bishop Stallings. Oh my goodness. It was a coming together. Christians, Muslims, nationalists, sororities, fraternities. And the thing that captured my thinking at the time, there has to be a cause bigger than the things that divide us for us to come together. And the cause that was bigger than all of us and the organizations and churches or mosques that we represented was black youth and the war that was raging on our young people.
Can we talk a little bit about the organizational framework, which was unprecedented? Once the word went out, the work started. The framework had to be created and put in place. Can you describe that framework and who you would consider those key players, known and unknown?
Yeah, God, I thank you for saying unknown, because it would not have been successful were it not for the known and the unknown. I'll start in Chicago with Reverend Albert Sampson, Dr. Conrad Worrell, Haki Madhubuti, Reverend Demas. He has passed away since. But in every city, we had local organizing committees. Reverend Ben Chavis was magnificent. Reverend Willie Wilson, Sister Claudette Marie Muhammad, and certainly Dr. Barbara Skinner. How could I have forgotten her? Well, when you start calling names, you're going to leave out somebody. And for anyone that is left out, it's not intentional in any way. It's just that I'm getting up in age now. I have a senior moment. All of the staff of the Nation of Islam, ministers and helpers, they were all a part of these local organizing committees. Maulana Karenga, he, along with Hakeem Madabuti, Dr. Conrad Worrell, Reverend Al Sampson, and others, we met in Chicago, and Dr. Karenga went back and authored a piece that was like what's the right word I'm looking for? The guiding principles, not only for the Million Man March, but beyond. And as Elijah Muhammad said to us, we don't need to go to the government to ask them to declare a holiday for somebody that we love. We declare it and we do it. So we declared Monday, October 16th, as the Day of Atonement, and we made it a national holiday. And we had reverence of every stripe. Now, see, this is a Muslim, Christian, nationalist, Hebrew Israelite. All of us were involved in something that was bigger than all of us. So right here at Howard, at is it Rankin Chapel? We had a beautiful showing of all these religious leaders, and we declared October 16th a national holiday. We weren't going to school, we weren't going to work, we weren't even going to shop in white stores. We were going to keep our money on that day. And in fact, I'm getting excited now, but I was the last one, if the truth be told, to know what was really happening in the field, because I was preaching everywhere I could go, but the field work was going on, and it was Muslims, Christians, nationalists, brothers, sisters, sororities, fraternities, everybody that wanted to see it successful went to work. And I have to tell you that the naysayers, when they saw that they couldn't stop it, they just joined it. Oh, in Chicago, Dorothy Tillman, a lot of the aldermen, the politicians. I mean, it was an amazing show of unity. And I guess it tells us in a simple way that the thing that's holding us back is us. Our pettiness, our divisions. But we have to have a cause bigger than our foolishness that will allow us to stop looking at each other and start looking at the success of a vision and a cause bigger than ourselves. And that is what the Million Man March accomplished. And what it showed is that if we have a cause bigger than ourselves, bigger than our egos, bigger than our petty desires for self-aggrandizement, then we can do anything and bring into reality any vision that we have. But the unity is the critical thing that must happen if we are to be successful. And that is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, our unity is more powerful than an atomic or hydrogen bomb.
As the media appeared to wait until the last minute to report on the impending success of the march, some of the speakers at the march also seemed to get behind the march only after success was all but guaranteed. Why do you think that was? Can you expand on that and how the final program for the day came together?
Let me say that everybody wants to be a part of success. I'm sure there were a lot of sideline people when Jesus marched into Jerusalem, but they found some palms somewhere to throw them at his feet to say Hosanna. I'm not going to fault the Johnny-come-latelys who came or speak negatively of them. It's only a sign that if the grassroots, which is the base of the success of the Million Man March and many of the leaders that we talked about, but the common people, then all the rest of the naysayers, when they saw something that they had never ever seen before and couldn't even envision it, they all wanted to be on the program. Who wouldn't want to talk to 1 million, 2 million black men? But here's the, I guess, a thought, Barbara Skinner, Cora Masters Barry, Reverend Willie Wilson, my staff, they worked into the night. Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad, Kamal Muhammad, Ishmael, Jamil, oh boy. They all worked, but putting the program together was a major undertaking, because now at the last minute, Congress that was closed down that day, many members of the Black Caucus showed up. They wanted to talk. Although in the beginning, Reverend Jackson was not on board, later, near the end of the process, Reverend Jackson did come in Chicago on board. Then a strange thing, as you asked me earlier, I didn't know that 1 million men would show up. But I was in the hotel, and some of the brothers that went out came back and said, Minister, there's over 150,000 men on the mall already, and it's like near midnight the night before. I said, are you sure? He said, yes. So now the next morning, the sun is rising, and the great Sheikh Tajani is making the call to prayer. And they're telling me now it's over 500,000 out there. Wow. Now, the minister had just blown completely away. And then Reverend Jackson came to the suite. Bishop Brookins of the AME Church came to the suite. And Reverend Jackson asked how much time he was going to get in delivering what he wanted to deliver. And I said, Reverend, I can't put a time on you. You go and say what is in your heart to say, and when you're finished, you're finished. I don't know nobody that organized something that would say something like that. But that's the kind of love and respect that I have for Reverend Jackson. And Bishop Brookins asked me, he said, Minister, are you going to use this march to proselytize your faith? I said, no. I said, I am going to ask those men to join an organization that is fighting for the liberation of our people, and to join a church, a mosque, a synagogue, where spiritual values are being taught. He said, you would do that, Farrakhan? I said, yes. Then he asked, and what about the money? You know, where's the money gonna go? I said, we've engaged 3 CPA firms, and we're going to give our people an audit of every nickel, every dime, and every dollar. Now, I know this had never been done before. Nobody gave an audit at any march that came on that mall, and people that, philanthropists that put up their money, you know, whatever. They had the money to give away, and black folk had the money to spend, but nobody gave an audit. But the money didn't come from philanthropists. The largest donation came from Michael Jackson, and he donated $100,000. And next to Michael, in advertising, was Mr. Bob Johnson of BET. And everybody, the nation raised over $500,000 for the march. The minister gave well over $100,000 from the charity that the believers give to me, much more than $100,000. I probably gave $250,000, and I'm not saying that for credit, because the record will show I never got a dime. I want you to, this is the untold story.
Yes, sir.
I, Louis Farrakhan, that called the march, never got as much as a dime or as little as a penny. See, my heart wasn't in it for money or for fame. I wanted to save the lives of young black men and show the world that we could be at peace with one another, a loving community, a united community that is worthy of life and protection for that life. My goal was reached, not about money, but about raising the level of consciousness of us, that if we can love each other and stand in ranks for 14 hours, shoulder to shoulder, then we can do it for 14 days, for 14 weeks, for 14 months, for 14 years, for eternity. all we had to show them it can be done, and God blessed us all to do it. I stayed up in a room. I let everybody who wanted to speak, speak. I never interfered. The people were down there chanting, Farrakhan, Farrakhan. Farrakhan stayed up in a room in the building, in the Capitol building, listening, looking. And when finally it came time for me to speak, it was almost maybe a few hours before sunset. And to be very honest, I'm telling you the absolute truth. As I walked down those stairs, my son Mustafa introduced me. It was like I felt like a leaf that was under some wind, and I was just floating down, not fully conscious of the dynamics of this magnificent thing that was in front of me. And the thing that I wanted to close that question with is this. Jesse Jackson spoke. Jesse Jackson knew that Congress was going to be voting either the next day, because Congress had closed that day, on the sentencing and the bill on cocaine, powdered cocaine versus crack cocaine. Jesse knew that because of his wonderful connection with the caucus. I didn't know it. I'm making a point. Barack Obama was among the 2 million. And Barack later wrote, it was great, but it could have been organized better. He's not wrong, but he wasn't in the mix. If Reverend Jackson and we had come together bringing our gifts and skills and talent, I would have known that the Congress was going to vote on something, and we could have turned the attention of those millions toward Congress, toward the way they were voting. If Barack had come out of the shadows when he knew the Million Man March was going to take place, he was already an organizer. I never saw Brother. If he had come and said, Brother, can I help organize? Of course he could. We would have been stronger. My point is, even though we were successful, the greatest success would have been the day after the march, not all the great work that we did before the march. And so the lesson learned is we have to have a cause bigger than ourselves, and we have to come together with our gifts, skills, and talents and put together that which will lift our people from the condition that our people are in.
After the Million Man March, you decided to embark on a world friendship tour rather than capitalizing on the success within America. What motivated you to leave the country and embark on that tour, that world tour? And what were some of the benefits that were gained from that?
When the Million Man March was conceived, I was reading the book of Luke. And Jesus before he went to Jerusalem, he said he had to go to Jerusalem, and from thence he would be taken up. I saw that as we had to go to Washington, and maybe that's the one more thing that I had to do before I could go again to the wheel and see my teacher face to face. After the Million Man March was over, I felt a sense of emptiness, loss, because I couldn't figure now, what is the next step? What should we do? And I went out to Phoenix at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's home in Phoenix, and I meditated and prayed. And this is what came to me. When I realized that Ronald Reagan, when he was going to try to overthrow Gaddafi, he contacted Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, and he wanted Egypt to attack Gaddafi from the east. And the forces that had already been lodged inside Libya that were against Gaddafi, they would rise against Gaddafi. But when I read in the New York Times Magazine about the plot, it said that Hosni Mubarak would not attack from the east. So when those inside Libya rose up against Muammar Gaddafi, they were seen, they were either hung in the public or killed. I thought to myself, they wanted an attack to come from the east. Well, we who believe that Allah appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, the great Mahdi, and that Elijah Muhammad is messenger of God. After the Million Man March that was seen all over the world, I said the enemy would want to go east to show them that we are not true Muslims because of this controversial aspect of our teachings. So it dawned on me that I should go east and tie the nation to the Islamic world and tie Black America to the struggle of Africa. And so that is the precipitant of our trip and our World Friendship Tour. So now I'm in Muslim capitals and I'm preaching. No way in heaven or hell after they heard me that they wouldn't say, he's a real Muslim. In fact, I think we were in Egypt. I think it may have been Egypt. And I was questioned about Master Farad Muhammad. And the answer that we gave, the Muslims were just happy and shocked and grateful that Allah had raised up a brother in America that was so strong in defending Islam against the disbelievers. In the Sudan, everywhere we went, we were wildly cheered and greatly accepted from the top all the way down, even in the holy city of Mecca in Arabia. So it was a great time
for us. And of course, the media here said he squandered all the good that he had gained from the Million Man March, going overseas, grubbing for money. See? And my international representative, Brother Akbar Muhammad, is here. Did we ask anybody over there for a nickel, a dime, or a dollar?
No, sir.
Let me hear it.
No, sir.
Thank you. To hell with you and your money. I have God. I'll get all the money that I need to do this without becoming a whore. And that's why we don't have good leaders today, because most are whores. You can buy them with money and with things. What black people need is somebody that can't be bought, can't sell us out. My teacher, Elijah Muhammad, was that man, and I'm trying to follow in his footsteps. We weren't grubbing for no money. We were connecting the Nation of Islam with the entire Muslim world, and Black America's struggle with the struggle of Pan-Africanists all over our planet. And we were successful.
As we close on our final question, we want to bring it back to the black male, which is where it started. Some have said the condition of the black men, young black men in particular, is worse today than it was before the Million Man March. We understand that having another march does not appear to be the best course of action today. If things are worse, what would you say is the better course of action as we move forward?
We are in a worse condition because we are at war, but we don't know that we're at war. Anytime somebody's working to destroy you and you don't know it, you can become an unwitting partner in your own destruction. And ever since the drugs and the war on drugs, my brother Akbar told me during the Reagan administration, there were about 330,000 incarcerated. Now there's 2,300,000 and counting. We don't understand what is happening to us. When Freeway Rick only wanted to make $1, he wasn't knowledgeable that he was a part of a conspiracy. Once he brought the drugs in and got paid, he was satisfied. It was good money. But the drugs were sent into the black community. Out of the black community was coming dollars for America to wage war against the rise of socialist governments in Central and South America. But now gangs were coming up, the Bloods, the Crips. They don't know that they are unwitting partners in a game of black youth self-destruction. Public Enemy is going to do a 30-city tour. Public Enemy is a rap group that started educating with rap. But it was a conspiracy, since they were making money, not compromising who they were. The powerful music moguls were saying, we've got to buy in to rap. But they wanted to change rap into something that would, number one, fill prisons. Prison became big business. So the drug culture and the gang culture came together to begin destroying our youth. Our young girls then being turned into prostitutes when the young ones who were the drug runners and others found that, man, we're going to jail for this, then they started using women as prostitutes. So all throughout the country, there's the degeneration of the black man into a total savage, and the black woman as a street urchin. The garments, the clothing that the designers design for our women and girls are the clothes of a prostitute. And when you walk with your gut out, your behind showing, all kinds of vulgarity coming out of your mouth, these comedy shows that are so low down and filthy keep driving the community down into the mud. See, this is part of a conspiracy. There was a meeting I read in outside of Los Angeles where record executives were invited to this meeting, but in the meeting were those who were buying prisons. And the talk was that gangster rap, they had to change from edutainment to gangster rap, what glorified the degenerate lifestyle among our people. So then beefs were created. Then we started shooting each other. Tupac gone, Biggie gone. These rappers now fighting and killing each other. We had a meeting at the National House, and all of the top rappers came to our table, and we talked to them about the hidden hand that is manipulating us like puppets on a destructive string. Now, corporate America is gotten in on the act, and prisons are now on Wall Street. There is a corporate entity that's buying up state prisons. And they'll pay a certain amount of money, and then they write a contract with the state. What does the contract say? You have to keep your prison population 90% full. How do you keep your prison 90% full? How do you do it? All over America with black young men stop and frisk, stop and frisk, stop and frisk. If they see a roach or smell something on you, they arrest you. You got a little roach in your pocket, or you just smoked a reefer. Now you're in jail for drugs. But when you go to jail, you work. You work for big corporations now at less than $1 or no more than $1.25 an hour. Well, heck, these people move their corporations and their businesses out of America because of a cheap labor market in Mexico and in Africa and in Asia. Now they don't have to move no more. They can stay in America and use prisons to do the work. And some of our black men are doing highly skilled labor in prison for some of the top corporations in America. This is part of the war on young black men and now women. And we are party to the war and don't know that we're at war. So the minister, the follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is on top of the mountain sounding the alarm as a watchman, because the rest of the watchmen are asleep on the job. Ain't nobody warning our people of the wicked intentions of the government of the United States on them. That's why the nation has to survive. And that's why the truth has to be told. But how can they know the truth except somebody is strong enough to tell it? And that's why I'm encouraging all these so-called ministers, get on your post and be a watchman on the wall, or you will be dying on your post from the chastisement of Allah. Now, what can we do to change that reality? I don't know. All I know is Elijah Muhammad said to me, brother, it's going to take more than preaching to change our people. I'll preach as long as he allows me to preach, but soon he's going to shut my mouth. And God help you when you don't hear my voice no more. I'm saying this to all of you because many of us are going to die under the chastisement of God because we know the truth and won't tell the truth, won't go to our people and seek to save them. We think that eating a bowl of bean soup and looking good and pretty is enough? Hell no. If you're not willing to sacrifice to get our people up out of the condition that they're in, then you're worthy of the chastisement of God. And that's on the way. My time among you is coming to an end. And I know that a chastisement, you know how it is when daddy, you at home with mama and you've been acting the fool and mama said, wait till your daddy come home. And then you petrified because daddy gonna tear that butt up. Well, I'm like your mother. That's how the messengers of God are characterized in the book. They're characterized as a mother. But my father, your father, is angry as hell at this condition. So the whipping is on the way. And let me tell you, if you read the Quran like I read it, or study the Bible like I study it, you know that the chastisement of God is something to be feared. And he said it would be 1 year of it where you wish for death, but death will flee from you. You know, I've been preaching for 57 years. You know, a man does get tired. Not tired of preaching, but tired of rejection. Tired of people applauding but not dancing to the rhythm of the truth. So God is tired too. So I'll close with this. Elijah Muhammad, the eternal leader of the Nation of Islam, was teaching a series in Chicago in 1972 called The Theology of Time. He told me that when he went up on the rostrum and was teaching, I think it was his 23rd week, he said, in the middle of the lecture, he said, God took his spirit. He closed the lecture, came down off that rostrum, and never went back in that mosque again until they brought in what they called was his body 3 years later in 1975. I'm telling all of you, this is no sport and this is no play. You have to watch the minister because I am the clock of time for you. And when you hear that God takes my spirit and I don't come out to talk to you no more, you're going to have to take it from there. But I do know everything is going to be all right after Daddy whipped all the butts that he has to whip, and none of them are big enough to challenge. Not the government of America, all the way down to our foolishness today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the time. And I pray that you have asked people much more knowledgeable than I. If you've talked to Sister Claudette Marie Muhammad, if you've talked to Reverend Ben Chavis, if you've talked to Willie Wilson, if you've talked to Marion Barry and Cora Masters Barry, if you've talked to Sister Barbara Skinner, if you've talked to some of the laborers in Chicago who worked, I mean, they were tireless, indefatigable workers for this cause. They can tell you more about the Million Man March than I. I never saw it. To this day, I haven't seen it. I just know that Allah used me to call it, and it was successful. But to ask me all the details about the innards of it, I was too busy preaching.
Yes, sir.
But may Allah bless you to get all that you're seeking.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No,
Brother
thank
Minister, so much.
No, thank you. First of all, for your wonderful patience. Where's Angela?
Oh, here I am. She's here.
Thank you for your wonderful patience. Thank you so much. And I pray that it will be as successful as you hope it will be.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the photographers and videographers and all of you for helping our sisters to make this what it hopefully will be.